Here are the top stories for today, March 24, 2021. The country's vaccination program gets a boost with the arrival of some 400,000 Sinovac doses donated by China. The government reiterates that medical frontliners are the priority in the inoculation drive as it digs deeper into a local official's apparent act of skipping the vaccine priority queue. Defy rules or get closed. The palace is not backing down over the suspicion of religious gatherings in the NCR Plus area as it warns church leaders against urging the faithful to ignore health protocols. And strong words over waters, the Philippines demands China's removal of fishing vessels off the Julian Felipe Reef. Good day, I'm William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. We start with the latest on the government's COVID-19 vaccination drive. Another 400,000 doses of Sinovac jabs donated by China arrived in the country this morning. However, the government's call for the public to remain vigilant stays while it races against time to contain the surge in COVID-19 cases. Janice Cave tells us more.
As the country continues to grapple with the surge in COVID-19 cases, more hope and small doses arrived just at the right time. Earlier today, an additional 400,000 Sinovac doses donated by China arrived at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport Terminal 2. Airport personnel disinfected the vaccine's cargo upon unloading them from a Philippine Airlines plane. With the arrival of more COVID-19 vaccines, government officials are optimistic that the country's inoculation drive will get a boost, especially for the workers who are at the forefront of the battle.
Remember, the healthcare workers are the ones caring for patients and cases. Sentiment about the Sinovac vaccine has improved tremendously. Okay? So we have to maintain that confidence, that growing confidence rather, for the Sinovac vaccine.
200,000 ang katao na compared na mabakunahan natin. Napakilang ulit po. Lalo na dito sa area ng NCR, ng Buracali, Cavite, Laguna, isa. Kung saan medyo nakita natin tumataas ang mga kaso, kailangan natin i-deploy ang mga bakuna.
These vaccines are apart from the 600,000 doses of Sinovac jabs donated by Beijing, which were used by the government in its rollout of COVID-19 vaccination for health workers and other frontliners earlier this month. Despite the arrival of more vaccines, the government says there is no reason to let one's guard down.
Huwag natin antayin na umabot pa po sa sitwasyon na bumagsak po ang ating healthcare system. Puno na yung mga hospital at wala na pong paglalagyan ng mga pasyente, pati yung mga quarantine na facilities.
With its donation reaching 1 million vaccine doses, China hopes these will help the Philippines win the fight against the pandemic.
China and Philippines are good neighbors, good partners. We hope that and we will continue to extend whatever we can to help this country to fight against the virus.
Aside from Sinovac vaccines, the Philippines also earlier received over 500,000 doses of AstraZeneca jabs from the COVAX facility. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Janice Cave.
While the president skipped the arrival of 400,000 jabs of Sinovac today, President Rodrigo Duterte will be present on Monday, March 29 to witness the arrival of around 1 million doses of the same jabs purchased by the Philippine government. Testing Czar Secretary Vince Dizon attends the turnover rites of the 400,000 doses of Sinovac donated by the Chinese government to the country. This is in addition to their donation of 600,000 doses of Sinovac delivered last February 28. The free jabs allowed the government to kick off its free immunization drive on March 1st. Apart from Sinovac, the Philippines has so far received 525,600 doses of AstraZeneca vaccines through the COVAX facility. Meanwhile, the government is also set to sign a supply agreement with Johnson & Johnson's for its 5 million doses of COVID vaccine. Vaccine czar Carlito Galvez Jr. said there is still an ongoing negotiation between the government and the Gamaleya Research Institute of Russia for the delivery of vaccines this month. Malacanang maintains that the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases will not be abolished. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the government would not concede to renewed calls for its abolition amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Roque, who is also its concurrent spokesperson, says the call for the abolition of the task force is politically motivated, considering that the 2022 national and local elections are drawing near. He said it is unfair to attribute the spike in COVID-19 cases to the supposed incompetence of the IATF-EID. He also reiterated that the task force is making decisions based on science and data.
Wala pong mabubuwag because pag binuwag mong IATF, it's as if you're bubuwagin mo yung buong gobyerno kasi wala nang pong ibang buhay ang IATF kung hindi yung gobyerno mismo.
Meanwhile, Roque said that retired military officers are the best people to lead the government's COVID-19 response and vaccination rollout because of their expertise in logistics. He explained that ex-military officers were leading the IATF because they were also appointed as members of President Duterte's cabinet. The president himself said he preferred to appoint ex-military officers because they were competent, honest, and follow his orders. There are over 60 former military officers currently hold ranking positions under the Duterte administration. The government assures it will provide compensation for those who would suffer from possible adverse effects of COVID-19 vaccines. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque made this clarification after President Rodrigo Duterte described as illegal for private companies to be free from liability for possible adverse effects of the jabs procured under tripartite agreements. He said Duterte's statement stemmed from concerns that vaccine czar Carlito Galvez Jr. was allegedly preventing private entities from purchasing COVID-19 vaccines. Roque explains that the law establishes a 500 million peso indemnification fund for those who may show adverse side effects after getting the shot.
Bagamat pinapayagan natin ngayon ang mga pribadong sektor na bumili ng bakuna, kinakailangan dumaan pa rin po sa tripartite agreement. Bakit po? Wala pa pong commercial sale ng mga bakuna. Lahat po yan, wala pang Certificate of Product Registration. Meron lang pong emergency use authorization. Hindi naman lahat ng side effects sasagutin natin. Yung mga side effects dahil nagkaroon ng willful neglect at saka gross negligence, hindi pa rin po natin sasagutin sang-ayon po sa batas.
Malacanang sought an investigation into the supposed administration of COVID-19 vaccine to Tacloban City Mayor Alfred Romualdez. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said he would ask the Department of the Interior and local government to look into the case of Romualdez. Romualdez, a COVID-19 survivor, announced in his Facebook post that the first Coronavac vaccine was administered to him by a nurse from the Department of Health who is deployed at the City Health Office. Under the national vaccination plan of the government, healthcare frontliners must be prioritized on getting the jabs.
Hindi po pwede magpabakuna muna ang hindi mga medical frontliners dahil kung susuway po tayo dito sa order of priority nito, maapektuhan po yung ating future deliveries galing po sa COVAX facility. And of course, we regret this incident, but I will refer the matter to the DILG for proper action dahil kinakailangan po talaga imbestigahan ito.
Meanwhile, Mayor Alfred Romualdez said he is willing to face the consequences of receiving the COVID-19 vaccine intended for their health workers. He said he decided to get inoculated with Chinese vaccine Sinovac to erase the concern of Tacloban residents on the efficacy and safety of the jab. He also said that since other medical workers refused to get the vaccines, they decided to get the shot instead of returning it to Metro Manila. Residents in Central Luzon need not go far to have themselves tested for COVID-19. A testing facility called Swab and Go opens in Clark, Pampanga, similar to a drive-through testing site. The testing is done in a four-step process, namely registration, verification, payment, and swabbing. The specimen will then be transported to the laboratory of Jose B. Lingad Memorial General Hospital for further testing and confirmation. The cost of the testing in the facility will be at 900 pesos per person, with a minimum of 5 persons in a group. The Swab and Go site is located at the open space parking lot of Clark Development Corporation. Still to come, Malacanang has a stern warning for church leaders who urge the faithful to violate health protocols. And testing the waters, Manila speaks up on Chinese vessels spotted off the Julian Felipe Reef. More on this when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Sa matinding laban natin sa Coronavirus Disease 2019, sugpuin din natin ang pagkalat ng fake news. Huwag magbahagi ng impormasyon na hindi tiyak ang pinagmulan. I-check mabuti ang source ng balita. Kumuha lamang ng impormasyon mula sa mga official channel ng Department of Health. Huwag magpadala sa maling balita, basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Pangalagaan ng sarili laban sa Coronavirus Disease 2019. Hanggat maaari, umiwas sa mataong lugar. Iwasang hawakan ang ilong at bibig, maging malinis sa katawan at ugaliin ang wastong paghuhugas ng kamay. Takpan ang ilong at bibig kung uubo o babahing. Umiwas sa mga taong nagpapakita ng sintomas ng coronavirus disease gaya ng lagnat, ubo at sipon. Magsuot ng face mask kung kinakailangan. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
Malacanang stands firm on its decision suspending mass gatherings, including religious activities, as the country deals with a surge in COVID-19 cases. This came as the Archdiocese of Manila decided to open its churches at 10% capacity starting today. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said Manila Apostolic Administrator Bishop Broderick Pabilio seems to be encouraging the faithful to defy the pandemic control measures set by the government. While stressing that the faithful can still observe the Holy Week in their homes, Roque warns a closure of churches if prelates will continue to defy health protocols.
Defiance po ng IATF resolution is not covered by separation of church and state. What is covered is the freedom to believe and the freedom not to endorse a religion. Pero in the exercise of police powers, we can order the churches closed. Huwag sana pong dumating doon, Bishop Pabilio.
Pabilio, meanwhile, maintained that 10% capacity in churches is not considered as mass gatherings. Holy Week activities have been suspended for the second consecutive year as the COVID-19 pandemic lingers. The Philippines demanded China to promptly withdraw its fishing vessels near the features in Kalayaan Island Group. The Department of Foreign Affairs stressed that Julian Felipe Reef in the Kalayaan Island Group lies in the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. The DFA lodged a note verbal protesting the unauthorized and lingering presence of Chinese ships in and around Julian Felipe Reef. The DFA demanded China to pull out its fishing vessels and maritime assets from the vicinity of all Kalayaan Island Group features in the West Philippine Sea and to direct its fishing vessels to desist from environmentally destructive activities. The Philippine Coast Guard initially reported that around 220 Chinese fishing vessels believed to be manned by Chinese maritime militia personnel were sighted moored in line formation at the Julian Felipe Reef as early as March 7. The United States and Japan expressed concern over the implications of the incursion of the ships believed to be used by Chinese maritime militia at the Julian Felipe Reef. China, meanwhile, lashes back at the United States over the issue. Marita Mawahe has the story.
The United States on Tuesday said it stands with the Philippine government amid reports of Chinese vessels amassing near the Julian Felipe Reef. The U.S. Embassy in Manila said it notes the diplomatic protest filed by Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr., as well as a call of Defense Chief Delfin Lorenzana for China to recall the ships. The U.S. accused China of using maritime militia to intimidate, provoke, and threaten other nations with claims in the region. It noted that more and more Chinese boats have been mooring in the area for many months regardless of the weather. The U.S. also found an ally in Japan over the matter. On Twitter, Japanese Ambassador to Manila Koshikawa Kazuhiko said issues related to the strategic waters are directly related to the region's stability. He says Tokyo strongly opposes any action that heightens tensions and instead support the enforcement of rule of law in the sea. He also called on the international community to work and protect the free, open, and peaceful seas. However, an unfazed Beijing has cleared words for Washington, D.C. The Chinese embassy in Manila tagged the U.S. Embassy in the Philippines on Twitter to tell Washington to stay out of the issue. China also insists that the reef, which it calls Niupe Jiao, is part of China's self-declared administrative district in the South China Sea. It added that both China and the Philippines have the will, wisdom, and ability to properly handle relevant issues through bilateral channels. Sought for comment, China's envoy to Manila also denied the presence of its militia in the area.
Chinese fishing vessels have been fishing in the area for many, many years. Now those vessels are taking shelter in the part of the, sea. I think it's a quite normal activity. There is no such militia vessel as claimed by some people.
For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muaje.
The Philippine Statistics Authority reports that over 15 million Filipinos have completed the Step 1 of the Philippine Identification System, or PhilSys, since the registration expanded to all provinces this year. The step involves the house-to-house collection of demographic information of low-income household heads and appointment settings in preparation for Step 2. This brings total Step 1 registrations to 25.7 million Filipinos since its rollout in October 2020. PSA Civil Registrar General Undersecretary Dennis Mapa said they are sure to achieve their 50 million target for 2021 given the pace in reaching the 15 million mark for Step 1 this quarter. PhilSys Step 1 registrations previously recorded 10.6 million registrants from October 12 to the end of December 2020, surpassing PSA's initial goal of 9 million registrants. The national ID will be a valid proof of identity for Filipinos and resident aliens that shall help simplify transactions, including government services, enrollment in schools, and the opening of bank accounts. Moving on to business, the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or PCCI, has called on Filipino consumers to patronize locally made products to help businesses thrive amid the pandemic. PCCI President Benedicto Hujuico said supporting local products will help businesses survive, rebound, and continue providing jobs. The PCCI also launched the hashtag Pinas Muna Tayo movement to support the promotion of Filipino brands such as the Department of Trade and Industry's Buy Local, Go Local campaign and Department of Science and Technology's OneStore.ph. PCCI Director for Industry Alfredo Yao praised DTI's Build Local campaign as it aligns with the group's initiative to encourage companies to source their raw materials that are locally available. The group also recognized the national government's efforts to increase the sourcing of local materials for infrastructure projects and other requirements. Up next, no end to atrocities. A father speaks up against the communist terror group who preyed on his teen daughter. And stop the attacks. The United Nations expresses concern over hate crimes against Asians. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Tandaan ang tamang paraan ng paghuhugas at paglilinis ng kamay upang makaiwas sa iba't ibang karamdaman. Basain ng tubig ang mga kamay at sabunin. Unang sabunin ang mga palad at ang likod ng mga kamay. Kuskusin na maigi ang pagitan ng mga daliri at maging ang mga kuko. Isunod ang pagitan ng mga hinlalaki at kuskusin ng paikot ang mga dulo ng mga daliri sa magkabilang palad. Banlawang mabuti ang mga kamay sa malinis na tubig at patuyuin ang mga kamay gamit ang single-use towel o air dryer. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Alamin ang mga dapat gawin sa lugar ng trabaho laban sa Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ang mga kumpanya ay dapat magbigay ng face mask sa kanilang mga empleyado. Bukod dito, magbigay kaalaman din patungkol sa COVID-19. Siguraduhin malinis ang kapaligiran. Maglagay ng sabon at hand sanitizer sa mga palikuran. Siguraduhin ligtas at nalutong maigi ang mga pagkain sa kantina. Obserbahan ang kalusugan ng mga empleyado at katrabaho. Kung sakali man na mayroon silang sintomas ng coronavirus disease, gaya ng lagnat, ubot sipon at hirap sa paghinga, ay agad ipasuri sa doktor. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. The father of a 16-year-old girl who was recruited in Iloilo and sexually abused by a commander of the New People's Army condemned the atrocities of the terrorist group. The man, whose name was withheld for security reasons, said he surrendered his daughter to the Army on March 18 for his family's safety. He shared that last year his daughter sought permission to look for work to help the family. He only learned that she joined the NPA when several rebels told him about the girl's recruitment. The girl claimed she had been on the run from authorities since then, and she had been sexually abused by an NPA commander. Investigators said the girl had planned to leave the group, but they threatened to behead her and harm her family. Colonel Joel Benedict Batara, commanding officer of the 61st Infantry Battalion, said the girl's family would be provided with security. Proper cases will be filed along with a complaint before the Commission on Human Rights, or CHR. The police regional office in the Caraga region has filed additional criminal charges against alleged top underground youth leader Renalyn Tejero. PRO 13 Director Brigadier General Romeo Karamat Jr. said additional arrest warrants for multiple attempted murder and attempted murder were served to Tejero on Monday. The warrants were issued by Regional Trial Court Branch 34 in Cabadbaran City, Agusan del Norte. Authorities arrested Tejero, secretary of the NPA-affiliated Kabataan Makabayan, on Sunday in Cagayan de Oro City. Tejero was a suspect in the killing of former rebels Zaldi Asidilio Ibanez and Datu Bernardino Astudillo in Surigao del Sur on March 19 last year. Karamat said Tejero was also involved in the attack of the Alpha Company of the 29th Infantry Battalion in Barangay Hinimbangan, Kitcharao, Agusan del Norte last February 5, 2017. She was also allegedly among the NPA members encountered by the scout platoon in the hinterlands of Barangay Mahayahay in Kitcharao on October 9, 2017. In our news overseas, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Monday expressed his profound concern over the rise in violence against Asians and people of Asian descent during the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, Farhan Haq, deputy spokesperson for Gutierrez, called out the deadly attacks harassment, incitement to hatred, and sharp, fiery words directed against Asians by those in power. It said Asian women have also been specifically targeted in a long list of cases of intolerance, stereotyping, and abuse. Guterres expressed his full support for the victims and families and stood in solidarity with all those facing racism and other assaults on their human rights. 8 people, 6 of whom were Asians, were killed in 3 shooting incidents in massage parlors in Atlanta, Georgia on March 16. The attacks came amid a troubling spike in violence against the Asian American community during the pandemic. And in sports, Maharlika Pilipinas Basketball League Commissioner Kenneth Duremdes has broken his silence about the issue between the league and the Basilan Steel, which was handed a forfeiture loss in the South Division Finals rubber match. Basilan Steel claimed they were forced to enter the playoff bubble at Subic Bay only to forfeit after 6 of its players tested positive for COVID-19. Duremdes said the MPBL has to be very strict about the interagency task force guidelines on the bubble, particularly a clause that a positive test would get them cancelled. He bared that they were not keen on allowing the Steel to play in the first place after 2 Basilan players initially tested positive for COVID-19. He also called out the Steel for breaking quarantine protocols. Duremdes also noted the financial issues hounding the Steel, particularly the non-payment of the players' salaries. Duremdes said they cannot heed the team's call for a full refund of expenditures during the bubble, but the commissioner said they were ready to help them. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. The country's vaccination program gets a boost with the arrival of some 400,000 Sinovac doses donated by China. The government reiterates that medical frontliners are the priority in the inoculation drive as it digs deeper into a local official's apparent act of skipping the vaccine priority queue. Defy rules or get closed. The palace is not backing down over the suspicion of religious gatherings in the NCR Plus area as it warns church leaders against urging the faithful to ignore health protocols. And strong words over waters, the Philippines demands China's removal of fishing vessels off the Julian Felipe Reef. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also, watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know. From the PNA Newsroom, we tell stories that inspire change. I am William Theo. Good day.